Part 3, glazing. This shouldn't take too long, ladies and gentlemen, but I always say that, right? But no, really it shouldn't take all that long because there's not going to be much explaining. It's going to be a lot of me doing, okay, just so you can see a couple of different techniques. All right, the first thing I'm going to show you is one of the things that's marked down on that sheet is that we want to, if we were going to glaze the inside versus the outside, to, in most cases, glaze the inside first. So when I glaze this big piece right here, when I glaze this, I'm going to glaze the inside of it first, and then I'm going to glaze the outside, all right? This one, I dipped it a little bit funky, and I've done some things to it, but I'm going to show you how to glaze the inside of a small object as well. And the way that we go about glazing a small object is by using a funnel, okay? Because I could take this funnel, I can put it down inside of there, all right? I can come over here to my Seltzer Uribe, that's the same glaze I used on the outside. And how much do I need to stir this?
A lot.
Until when?
Until all of the gunk at the bottom.
Good, Michaela. Until that sludge on the bottom. You got to make sure that there's no sludge down on the bottom. Somebody was using this earlier, so it's actually really well stirred. So I don't need to go all so super crazy on it, right? Now, in order to pour something into there, I need to get myself a container. There's a bunch of containers over there by Richard, okay? People don't clean them out properly. Let's not be those people, right? This is a properly clean container. The edges of it have been used, a sponge has been used on it to get rid of the glaze from there, all right? You don't want any residual other glaze inside of there because it could contaminate your glaze. But so many times there's lazy people that are in the studio that they get done. When I found this, it had like a pile of glaze down at the bottom of it. It was still wet, right? That's not properly cleaned. So I don't want my students to be improperly cleaning stuff, all right? So I want to get some glaze in here, all right? Richard, can you toss me one of those sponges from up there? Yeah, just like rinse it out a little bit. Because this is an important thing too. Like right now, there's all this drippy glaze right there, right? If I start to move it over there, it's going to drip on the ground. Then I might drip it on my piece. Perfect, thanks. So what I do when I get this glaze is I just have a sponge around, or I have Richard get my sponge for me. Right.
I think this one.
Oh!
Oh.
Oh, got it.
Oh, they were.
She's right up there, bro. Go, Richard, go find her.
It's right there, Mark.
It's right here. All right, so that way this is cleaned. It's not getting all over the place. So when I go to pour it, it's not going to drip on my piece when I'm pouring it also. And some of these like yogurt containers, you can kind of manipulate them so they become an oval that makes it easier to pour in, okay? So I only need to get this to maybe about half or 3/4 of the way, and then I can take the funnel and put it right in there while I'm working on it. Now I'm going to take this over to the this canister, and then when I take it out, I spin it around in a circle like this to get it out, and then do that shake that we know and love at this point, right? Yeah. Okay? Now we've got glaze on the inside of that. I kind of put some wax on there so I wouldn't get too much of a coat on there, but I also put some wax on there for another reason. We're going to talk about wax in a second, all right? So, actually we'll stay on it since we're on this piece. I've already put some wax here and on the handles. I haven't put it here yet because, look, this part's glazed, but this part is not. Do I have to glaze this part?
No.
No, I could leave it bare clay if I wanted. But what I've done is I put wax on there. This wax is a resist. It resists the glaze, just like wax resists on your car when you get your car or truck waxed, right? It beads up in little beads. It kind of did it a little bit on this thing here, but this hasn't dried for quite enough time yet, all right? So I'm going to show you how to apply wax as well. When you use a brush, if you're using one of our brushes, you need to be very careful with it because wax dries. When the wax dries, it will ruin a brush. The brush will be no longer usable because it'll dry up and it'll be so gunked on there, it's like worse than chewing gum, right? So we have this special stuff over here, which is Dr. Bronner's. Anybody use this stuff?
No.
Any hippies in here? I use this stuff. I love it.
Is that the?
Right? It's a pure Castile soap. They sell it at like REI, Whole Foods. I think you can get it at Trader Joe's even. But anyways, it's just pure soap. It doesn't have all the additives and junk that a lot of soaps in the world have in them. But we keep it in here because it really cleans the wax off the brushes nicely. Okay? So This is something that when you use wax, even if it's on your own brush or our brushes, use a little dollop of that. A little goes a long way. They say it's 18 in 1, I think. Yeah, 18 in 1. You can use it as deodorant, mouthwash, toothpaste. You can use it for shaving. Oh yeah, you just take a little bit and beep, beep, beep. I'm telling you, this is hippie stuff. If you ever have a spare 3 hours, read all the stuff it says on the label. The guy who invented this stuff is quite a character. It's not delicious, but this one's peppermint, so. Yeah,
He gets the job done.
They make a tea tree oil one too. That one tastes even worse. So if you're going to use mouthwash or toothpaste, I use this one rather. All right. So you can go on the website, check them out. Quite a story. There's even on Netflix. There's actually a documentary about this guy. Oh, wow. Yeah. No, you're not reading it right now. You got to pay attention to me, Echo. All right.
Yeah.
So I painted on this wax, right? Once you paint it on the wax, you got to wait like 20 minutes, right? Because I shouldn't have even done this quite yet, but I'm not that concerned about it because it's the same color, right? So I'm going to show you how to apply some wax though. The wax resist is in this little container. If it runs out, just let us know and we'll get more, all right? We just don't put a ton in here because if we put a ton in here, it tends to go bad, all right? I've got this little sponge circle thing, all right, that I'm going to use. I'm going to kind of get some wax on there, but not too much. There we go, maybe. And I'm going to come in here because wax resist can be used as decorative. You can paint lines on your objects. You can make shapes on there. So I'm going to take it and just kind of get a couple of little blots of like dots here. And I don't care if they're perfect circles either. And I'm not looking for them to be right next to each other, you know, like equidistant apart or anything like that. Because sometimes that variation is what gives it some excitement in the pattern, okay? The handles I've already waxed because I don't want to put dots on those and I don't want to get another glaze on those.
So wax is pretty much like what lotion would do if we like put on lotion.
Even worse.
Oh.
Okay. So it's going to be really.
It's going to be something
really
drastic.
Resists the glaze.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. There we go. We got some dots on it. See.
Yeah,
All right. So this is solid down here. This is dots. So you can see that there's some sort of a pattern that's emerging here. Okay. That's the idea. So now I'm going to set that aside and we'll come back to it near the end. Right. Now this. What do I do with this?
Wash it.
Okay. I'm going to wash it for one. And honestly, guys, the soap, I just used this a minute ago, right? If I wash this off, I use the warm water when I do it, if it ends up coming out warm water. If you get it off there right away, without it taking you too long to apply anything, you don't have to use the soap, all right? But, and if it's your own object, or like this belongs to me, right? If it was the studio's, I probably would still use the soap no matter what, all right? Wax resist dries in the air, so we need to make sure that we close it tight, and it goes back in this bin over here. And the soap is in that bin as well, all right? So that's one decorative technique. Now, how many of you guys used wax in high school? Did anybody dip glazes in high school and use wax? I'm gonna guess in high school that all your pieces, you turned them over like this, and you spent about 10 minutes really carefully waxing the bottom of the piece, right? They didn't have you do that? All right. Some people have their students do this. Go along the whole bottom and a 1/4 inch up and paint wax on. And then set your piece aside and wait 20 minutes. And then come back and dip it in the glaze. And the whole idea is so that you don't get wax on the bottom of your piece. But guess what? Even when you dip it and you put wax on it like that, you still have to wipe it off. So most of the time what students end up doing is they dip it and then they don't bother to wipe it off and then it ends up on the reject shelf. There's no reason to put wax on here. It's actually a waste of wax and that stuff is very expensive. You don't need to do that because it's so easy to sponge it off. So easy, right? So if you have done that in the past and you're accustomed to that, let's stop that behavior because we can just wipe the glaze off the bottom of an object and it's way easier, okay? And it's way faster, it's easier, it's everything. It's everything you want it to be. All right? Any questions about wax? Can somebody hand me the black stain from over there? Thank you, Natalie. All right. So remember I told you I was going to show you guys how to apply stain. All right? Oh, so, sorry, back to this really quick. With this one, the reason why I'm doing all this stuff is so that I could get a different glaze effect. So when I dip this the next time, I'm going to dip it down this way to that little section, so that way I can have a different glaze on just this band. It won't be down here because it's been waxed. All right? Then after that, I'm going to choose another glaze and I'm going to dip it this direction once those little dots are all dried. Right now I can see little spots where it's not dry, right? Where it's like still kind of a milky color. It'll go more of a transparent yellow once it dries all the way. Then I can put another color on top of that. And the Celso Uribe will be here where the wax is, but then it'll be Celso Uribe and another glaze in those regions where the wax is not, right? So it's kind of playing with some of the ways that glaze can go on. And you notice that because I'm doing a full double dip up here, right? It's up on the top, not down on the bottom. I didn't put the polka dots on the bottom because if I did that, I'm kind of asking for it to run, right? Anything we do down on the bottom, if we get extra bits of glazes down there or extra coats of glaze down there, you're more likely for it to run and end up on the shelf and end up kind of having all that white junk all over your pot, which is not super fun. Okay? Any questions about that? All right. So we talked about how to put the stain on, the mason stains or the heavy metals on, and then sponge them off. And then you're going to watch me glaze that one in a second. Okay? But before we do that, I'm going to show you guys how to apply stain in full power, right out of this, on top of glaze. We can do that on top of glaze, but we don't want to do it underneath glaze. All right? So I want to get this moving because remember, this stuff really drops in suspension. Right? It settles down at the bottom because it's so heavy. So I'm going to get myself, kind of get some in that brush. This is really weak. And then I can come in and I can kind of do some brush techniques like this, where I kind of just outline where those two glazes meet, okay? So this is going to create a black line, okay? Something like that, right? Then I'm going to do the same thing to the inside because I've got those overlaps of glaze. Do I have to do this?
No.
No, it's not necessary. It's just an option.
So you could paint on a stain, but you can't paint on glaze.
Correct.
Okay.
Because this is really watery, okay?
Okay.
So you actually get a brushability out of it because there's so much fluid, right? The stains, the glazes, they won't do that at all, right? They'll just essentially dry as soon as you touch the brush to the surface. Cool. Happy with that? I dig it. All right, so that one's ready to go. Bottom has already been wiped off, 1/4 inch up from the bottom. So this thing is ready to go outside, okay, and get fired. And this is terrible because I didn't take any notes. And I did this on purpose because I have no clue I don't remember how I glazed this. I think that I used the green glaze, the ocean green here, and I think this was the licorice. That's what I have in my head. We'll see when it comes out, okay? So if I did the licorice, maybe this was not even necessary, right? Because it's black, and the licorice is black. I don't know, right? But if I would have taken notes, I would know right now, wouldn't I? But right now it's a gamble. I'm going to put it into the kiln and we'll see how it comes out.
It's
right?
a mystery.
Either way, it's okay. But I did it on purpose so you guys can know that sometimes you have to do something and then come back to it. And if you come back to it, you didn't all do it in one day, you're not going to remember everything that you did, right? I mean, I think that's what I did, and it sounds like maybe that's what I did, but maybe I didn't do it that way, I don't know. All right? I don't need to wash this right away because black stain will not stay on there. It can dry completely and I can clean my brush afterwards. All right? Any of the glazes, you can paint on a glaze afterwards, you know, after you have a base coat on, if you want to kind of try and get it to brush a little bit. Maybe you might have to thin it out a little bit. I don't know. You can try and attempt it, okay? What was I just... What did I just say?
Painting on glaze.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Glaze won't dry up on your brush. If it dries up on your brush, you can just wash it easily. The only thing in here that's going to dry up on your brush and ruin your brushes is what?
Wax.
Wax, okay? Put that back for me now. Thank you. All right, now for the easy stuff. This guy right here, okay? This one is that black stain that I did. Remember from the last demonstration, when we do anything like that, we put it on full strength, we wipe it off, and then we wait how long?
20 minutes.
Day.
24 hours. We wait 24 hours before we glaze it because we got it really wet when we wiped it off, right?
Yeah.
So because we got it so wet when we wiped it off, it's not going to get the right amount of glaze consistency. The application is not going to be correct. So we need to wait 24 hours before we get in and glaze it. All right?
That's the black stain, right?
This one was the black stain, correct. But it's the same for the iron stain. It's the same for all that stuff. I need the Celadon. Where are you, Celadon? Here we are. So one of the things that's really interesting about ceramics and about this glazing process, right? Look at the color of this. I'm going to fire it in oxidation. It's going to come out this color.
Ooh, pretty.
Wow.
Isn't that weird? Yeah.
Is that the
Right?
copper?
So the thing you have to remember, no, it's not copper. It's interest. I'll tell you what it is in a second. But the weird thing about ceramics is that and this is another reason why I want you guys to do these glaze notes too, is because you have to, in your head, imagine what your piece is going to come out like when it comes out. It's not like applying acrylic paint to a canvas. As soon as you apply a yellow paint to a canvas, you know what yellow it's going to be. It's not going to change. You know, you're not going to come back to it 24 hours later and then all of a sudden it's going to turn green, right? But that's what happens with some of these glazes. They don't look anything like they're supposed to, right? And I get this one a lot too, is that they're like, okay, well, Brian said if you want this green that you're going to dip it in this Celadon glaze. But it's shiny and I want it to be shiny, so I've got to put clear glaze on it. Do I need to do that? That's a confusion that some students have. Celadon will come out like this on its own, right? The glaze will flux out, it will become shiny on its own. You don't need to put a clear glaze on. You only need to use clear if you have slips that you want to show through, or if you just want to show the color of the clay, if you like what the clear glaze looks like, right? On your clay. Does that make sense? So the reason why this material or this glaze becomes green is because that's fired in reduction. The color that makes this glaze, that green color, is iron. All right? It's an iron green. Really low percentage of iron fired in reduction, iron will actually become green. If it doesn't have enough reduction, it becomes what we love to refer to in ceramics as yellow dawn. Okay, not Celadon. This is what it looks like in oxidation. It's not that pretty of a glaze in oxidation, but maybe you might like it for something that you make, right? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it, but some people might be because it's got this pale yellowness to it. It's not a bad color.
It's like
right?
baby puke.
Yeah, it's a happy puke. Nice, Teresa. All right.
Got to
So-
eat a lot of banana.
I'm going to stir this thing up. And I'm going to show you a different dipping technique where you don't need to use glaze tongs. Right? Because Celadon's a cool glaze in that if you get a single dip, it gets this color. If you get a double dip, it changes color a little bit, right? So what I can do with this is I can kind of look at it and kind of get an eye for what the piece looks like, and I can dip it down in here. Shake it off, right?
So close.
Look at how fast it dried. It's already dry, okay? In a few more seconds, it'll be completely dry, and I can touch it. I've got a little bit of drips that are back here on the back side, which is okay. I'm going to show you something to do in a moment with that. But it's dried so fast, now I can come and do this, and I can dip it and overlap it just a little bit in that one spot. And then this little spot right here, just this one little stripe, is going to be a little darker green color. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? We can do that with glazes. Sometimes that becomes the aesthetic, right? So we'll set that one aside and let it dry up a little bit so I can show you the rest of what we're going to do with that. All right? Everybody with me so far? Everybody happy? Questions?
Do you have to clean the bottom?
Yeah, but I'm going to wait till it's all dry.
So okay.
Yeah. Because some of it in these nooks and crannies, some of the stuff in there is still a little bit soft, right? Like the glaze is still a little wet. So if I let it sit for a little bit longer while I do something else, and then I come back to wipe it off, it's going to be way easier to wipe it off. Yes?
Now, when you double dip glaze, will you be able to tell a difference, or is it going to look like the same thing and you're going to find out later?
If you double dip a glaze, in some cases, like if it's a transparent glaze, the double dip, like in Celadon's case, like what we just looked at, right? There is a difference. 2 dips, 1 dip, right?
No, I'm saying like when it's like that, like dry. Are you going to be able to tell a difference?
You can, kind of, sometimes. I don't know.
I can see.
Yeah, I can see it's right there.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's subtle, okay?
Okay.
But you'll know in your mind that you did it,
Okay.
and you'll know on your notebook that you did it, right? Because in your notebook, you should say that you overlapped it about 1 inch, right? Or in that case, I think about 1.5 inches, right? Some of the thicker glazes you might be able to tell easier or better, okay? Because the thicker the glaze, the thicker the application it gets. And sometimes we have thicker glazes there on purpose. Like we want that glaze to be that thick,
So if
okay?
you don't want the double glaze, you could just use the utensil and then.
Yeah, I could have used a utensil and dip that in there with the glaze tongs and been done with it, okay? But what if like Natalie was over here like a crazy woman and she had both, she had like 4 sets of tongs and she was like doing some crazy performance artwork piece of dipping glazes. You're like, oh, I don't want to wait for her. I'll just go ahead and, figure it out, right? So, this is the Seltzer Uribe. So, it goes back in there. If you don't know where it came from, do you want to guess?
No.
No. All right. If it looks, you're like, oh, this one's green, and this hint to mint one is green too.
Don't do it.
Right? Just put it in there, right? Because they're both green.
No.
No. Okay. If you don't know where it came from, if you can't remember where it came from, just pour it out. Okay. Pour it into the sink here. I don't think we have a scrap glaze right now, but I don't think that scrap glaze has actually. I think it came from a bucket that we have outside that had a bunch of powdered glaze inside of it.
And at this point, if you wanted to mix it with a second color and like make a combination, would you do that right now, or do you have to wait for that one to dry a bit more?
This one is dry enough if I wanted to put another glaze on there, like if I wanted to sprinkle something on inside of there, you could do that, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just letting it dry out a little more. I want it to dry completely because I'm going to show you guys a technique called finger sanding. I think we went over it a little bit with the holes from the glaze tongs. All right. Don't need that funnel anymore, but I'll take care of that in a second. Armando, can you reach behind you? There's a thing that says scrap. That one? I haven't used this one yet, so I want to try it out. It looks like a pretty color.
Is that the recycle?
Yeah, it's basically just, a lot of studios do this so that we don't have any glaze waste, right? If we get rid of glaze, some studios will have, we don't have one yet here, I don't think, but sometimes they'll have just a bucket where if you have excess, you pour it into that bucket. If you if you don't remember where it came from.
So it's a free for all when you dip it in there.
Yeah,
So
but right now this scrap glaze we know looks like this. And I'm going to be honest with you, most studio scrap glazes are some sort of a green color. Because there's a whole lot of copper that gets used in studios. And typically they're a transparent glaze too, even though opaque and transparent glazes go into them, right? Typically.
So does that mean that
Most
the
students have
transparent one is stronger?
No, it's just diluted.
No, just maybe means there's more. When we put all those materials together, their ratio equals what the ratio would be for a transparent glaze versus a opaque glaze. You know, because you're basically, when you make these scrap glazes, you're mixing together all the colors, right? So you're getting all these different, everything melts at cone 06, or sorry, cone 6. And if everything melts at cone 6, like a lot of times the opaque glazes might be that way because of some one material that they have in them that's a certain type of percentage, and that certain percentage is enough to make it opaque. But then when you put another glaze in that's totally transparent, it's going to mess up that ratio, right? And so it just changes the ratio essentially. And if the ratio's changed so that it's going to make a transparent glaze, then so be it, okay? Can somebody go and rinse that out for me? All right, same thing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the inside of my my slab piece, my supported form.
Oh, it's dripping, it's dripping, it's dripping.
It's okay.
Drip, drip.
This is a bigger piece, right? So this is a technique to glaze a bigger piece. I'm going to get a little bit more than half if I can. All right, there we go. Now I'm going to take this, and when I pour it out slowly, and I rotate it.
Ooh, we fancy here.
Oh, I didn't even make it.
Oh.
So I'm quickly going to take another bit, get it in there right away, while the glaze is still a little bit liquid. It's better that way. Obviously, I'll be cleaning up the floor here in a second. All right, there we go. The inside is glazed. Somebody go ahead and rinse that out for me as well. Thank you. So, we can have things glazed differently on the inside and the outside, but the one thing that's going to be that's going to keep us from really doing that necessarily is going to be the shape of the top. Okay, if the shape of the top of an object is like this, where it kind of moves around like this, if I take this directly into a glaze and push down, some of that glaze is going to get on the inside as well, and you just have to be okay with that if that's what you want to do. Or you have to wax down inside to wax resist everything, so you can then sponge a little bit of that off afterwards, right? Or you can just dip it into the same color, right? Sometimes, like this one, this scrap glaze, this one has a smaller bucket, a much smaller bucket, because we just mixed it up as a test, right, to see what it would look like. So this may not be the best glaze to do this on, but what I could do is I could take this and I could dip it as much as I can down in there, right? Let it dry, and then I could dip it down in this way, but it's going to displace a lot of water when I do that, right? So you just have to be careful with how it is that you do that. We have a spray booth that's here. I'm really reluctant to show students how to use the spray booth in beginning ceramics, because then everybody wants to use the spray booth on all their pieces, even when they're little like mini mugs like this. But that's not what the spray booth is for. The spray booth is for a couple of things. Number one, it's for big objects that you can't fit into a bucket, or in this case, scrap glaze is it's too small of a bucket for me to dip this big of a piece in, right? Same thing with even like hint of mint or white crawl. I can't really get this piece inside of there, but I could get it into the big trash can glazes. It doesn't mean that you have to glaze your objects with the trash can glazes if you have a big object, right? If you want to know how to use the spray booth, let me know. I can walk you over here. I can show you how to use it. I'm not going to show the whole class though, all right? So I'm going to end up spraying this a little bit later, but you guys get the idea. Inside first. Right now I have some glaze on the outside of this, right? Is that okay? It is okay, kind of, right? But it's a transparent glaze, so it's going to show up. So maybe I come to it like this and just kind of clean off those little bits. Just a little bit. We don't have to go crazy on them, right? Like so, right? The rest of it's going to get glazed with the spray booth, okay? And so I don't need to do anything more. I'm just going to remember that that's the scrap glaze, so I remember which one to come over here and get. But I don't actually have to spray that with the scrap glaze. I could spray with another glaze, right? Okay. All right, so let's come back to this real quick. This thing is totally dry now. Oh, I've got a lot of scrap glaze on my hands, so I'm going to dry myself off or wash myself off. You don't want to cross-contaminate with your hands either. Can somebody go and take care of that too? All right, when I go to touch my glazed objects, if I have damp hands or wet hands, as soon as I touch this, the glaze is going to take on that water and it's going to put a fingerprint mark on it, all right? So we want to make sure that we only grab a hold of things when we have dry hands, okay? These little bits down here where it's a little bit, if you can see, I don't know if you can, but you can see there's some drips from where I did that, right? It's okay to leave those that way, but with a transparent glaze like this, the Celadon, if you turned it over, you would kind of see those marks. So what I can do is I can come in here and just with my finger, just rub very gently. This is what I call finger sanding. Because this stuff is so powdery and so light that my fingerprint is enough of a sandpaper. It's like, you know, more than 1,000 probably. You know, they rate sandpapers like 60, 80, 120. Right? Do you guys know what that means?
Yes. It's the grit.
It's how many little small pieces of grain there are in 1 inch. Right? So if it's 1,000, it means there's 1,000 grains in that 1 inch. If it's 60, it means there's 60. Right? So in order to get 60 grains in an inch, you need big grains. To get 1,000 in 1 inch, you need little grains. Right? So this is like really little sandpaper, right? Like 1,000 or 2,000 or something. Right? So if I need to do any, you know, if I have any little drips or any bumps that I want to get rid of, like this bump right here, then I'll come in here, kind of finger sand it a little bit. Bada boom, bada bing, all right? Make sense, gang?
Question: Is the powder from glaze the same as like the actual like clay powder?
Kind of. All these bins have a bunch of powders in them.
Oh.
Each one of these bins has a different powder in it, and it's marked on the front of it what it is. This one is magnesium carbonate. This one is bentonite. Bentonite's a clay. Magnesium carbonate is the same stuff that they put into those chalk machines that they put chalk lines on football fields and baseball fields and stuff, right? Mag carb is what gives the crackle in our crackle glaze. If you put 40% around of mag carb into any glaze, it'll turn into a crackle glaze because it dries the heck out of it. It will make it so that it cracks like clay does on the Colorado River when there's a flash flood. Okay, so I'm gonna get a clean sponge here.
Ooh, that was pretty. No. One bottom row.
Leave some water in it because we need water in it. My hands are soaked right now. I didn't bring my towel over, so I'll just use my jeans. Then I'm going to take this. Look, see how easy that is? Just a little bit of a rub, and it takes all that off of there. There's no reason to do that whole wax thing, right?
If we want to be more precise, can we use like the little like.
You can use a
symbol?
little sponge, yeah. But what I like to do is, you know, when I do this, I kind of messed up right here and got that little bit, but most of the time I just try and draw it across, keep it as flat as I can, and draw it across the foot, and it just will naturally start to rise up on the edge if I push a little bit harder, but keep it parallel to the foot, right? Celadon is not a very runny glaze, but I'm still going to make sure that I bring it up from the edge about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm moving this sponge around and getting it into different spots that don't have the glaze on it, so I can make sure it's totally clean on the bottom, right? And then that is ready to go, right? Good to go? All right, so I am going to quickly use the Temoku. This is our Temoku. You can use it down there, but for demonstration purposes, I'm pulling it up here. All right?
I need to swole this person to lift up those buckets for me.
Hello.
It's me.
Take a look at the end of these whisks when you use them, because sometimes there's glaze on the bottom of them, right? So I'm going to stir up this Temoku, really get it moving. I'm going to come with this. This thing's dried enough now. I'm going to dip it down inside. See what the wax resist does?
Oh, that's satisfying.
I missed a little spot. How cool is that? All right? I can wipe this stuff off. I can even come in here where the wax is, and I'm going to go in there. Maybe I get a smaller sponge too, but when it's wet, we come through here and get rid of the other excess glaze that was on there, all right? Because it won't go away. It's not just going to go away easily, all right? You can use something like that too, yeah.
You don't want to use it?
No, I just have too much other glaze on there, so I have to just rinse this out. Once it's dried out, you can still do it, but it's easier to get it when it's wet. We're gonna have you're singing on the video.
They're gonna have me and Echo both.
It's a good song.
It's a limited edition soundtrack, ladies and gentlemen.
So when I do this kind of glazing, where I'm putting one glaze, like waxing, and then putting another glaze over top of it, I try and find colors that are kind of
Similar
like
color
different
scheme? Oh.
from one another. But that doesn't mean you have to do that, all right? So this one has, so this is the Temoku, which is going to come out pretty dark. I'm going to do this in oxidation, and the reason why I'm going to do it in oxidation is because I like the green, the Seltzer Uribe. I like the way it comes out green rather than red, okay? So that's Seltzer Uribe. So I'm trying to think of what else I could do on this part that's going to kind of still contrast.
White.
Ooh,
You finally gave an idea.
nice. I like it.
Watch him not do
Total
it.
white.
Just like a black cardboard
This is what wax
box.
looks like when it dries.
That's the best.
It's on there. Like, it's really hard stuff. That's why it's still just sitting on here, hasn't been scraped off. There's really no reason to. This one's a good one, Yalixa. Get in there and show
Really short.
the video. You can see how much water is on top of that. All right.
Well, let's do a stirring compilation, ladies.
Just a slow motion.
A compilation.
Yeah, just videos of you stirring all of them.
It's so satisfying.
Oh, that's something. That's that good.
I really kind of wish we just called this shiny white. I don't know why we need to bring toilet bowls into the studio, but I mean, I guess toilet bowls are made out of porcelain in most cases. Some of these glazes stink when you swim. Maybe that's why we call it toilet bowl white. Because this one smells kind of like rotten eggs when you stir it.
Oh,
It doesn't mean that anything's wrong with it.
Can you have,
There's a few of them that just smell that way when you get in there. You start stirring.
stuff that's in it? Ooh, does that smell?
That's what like rich people's nose to understand that smell.
Oh yeah. Is that sulfur? Oh yeah.
Someone?
Everyone's like,
Oh, but wait, there's more.
There's more. Billy Mays here.
It's the only time that I get to have other people wash my stuff for me, right?
You gotta use
Normally
it.
I'm over here and I'm doing it all by myself, trust me. You'll see it. All right, ready for the satisfaction?
Yes, yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that good stuff.
Ooh, look, yeah.
Ooh, baby girl.
All right, but same thing. I gotta get in there
Oh, it's in. Oh.
and kind of blot that, right? Get all that stuff off of there. So see, I knew I was doing these dots, so I waxed all of the handles because the handles are kind of like dots. So they kind of go with that same motif. And in a lot of cases with this stuff, it works better when you're trying to get it off if you just kind of blot at it. Now, wax resist is just one thing that works as a resist. There's also a material, we don't actually put it out here because it's actually more expensive. And if I wanted to be really, really precise and get exact, like these circles, to where these circles didn't have any white glaze on them, I wouldn't use wax resist. I would use something called latex, right?
Ah.
Because latex, you can paint latex on, let it dry. You can dip it into the glaze, and then when you're done, you take a little X-Acto blade and you get it underneath it and you peel it off, and it peels the wax and the latex off with it, okay? So, just something to think about.
Is it a specific type of latex or
Liquid latex.
Oh, girl.
Yeah. I mean, we get it from ceramic suppliers, so, you know, but it's just basically the same as, you know, liquid latex that you would even get kind of this time of the year.
For like
for
holiday
makeup, yeah, for like studio stage makeup kind of stuff, for putting on prosthetics.
I was gonna say, like, is it possible for us to bring our own like liquid latex?
Yeah. Because that comes off. That comes off before you fire it, right? I've also done some stuff before where I have where you take like those dots that you get at like Staples that are like for pricing out your stuff at your garage sale or whatever. You could take those and stick them on sometimes in spray. Right, spraying is the only way that works for those because if you dip them, sometimes they fall off. The adhesive's not that good when you try and stick it onto the pieces of, the powder that used to be glazed, right? So, anyways, there's lots of different things you can do. You know, I was just watching a demonstration on, I think it was on Instagram recently, like just the other day. And that demonstration I saw on Instagram was somebody who uses, is anybody familiar with that material Tyvek? Have you ever gone by a house that's being constructed and you see that white paper that has that sign all over it? It says Tyvek, right? That stuff is reusable, and so I just saw somebody that uses Tyvek as a release. So they'll put it onto a piece of clay, and they'll kind of press it down so it sticks, like maybe spritz it with water while it's still greenware, right? Or like leather hard, cheese hard. Stick it on there, and then they'll kind of push it down into place, and then paint on slip over the Tyvek, and then pull the Tyvek off, and then underneath is the shape that they created by using that stencil, essentially, right? So there's lots of different things that can be done. There's lots of different techniques that are out there. Like I said, I'm going to show you. You know, this stuff is long. It takes a long time to show you, and you're going to see a lot of different techniques. We've seen a lot of different techniques just right here, but it doesn't even scratch the surface. There's so much that can be done with glaze. So I encourage you guys, if you're interested, to go online and look online and try and see if you can find some other different technique that maybe kind of sticks out to you, that looks like it might be interesting. Does that make sense, gang? All right, any questions? All right, this one already has the wax on there, but I'm still gonna do this just in case, because I wanna make sure that there's not any wax on there, or sorry, any glaze on there, so that when I stick it out there, it'll be good to go. I'm gonna do a little bit more work to that to kind of clean it up, but for the most part, it's ready, okay? And those are our decorating techniques, essentially, plus how to dip the inside of a large object, okay? Cool? All right, thank you guys.